Welcome to the first panel session of the IoT Proptech Summit 2021. My name is Mikele Brack, and I'm the CEO and founder of Urban Living Futures, and we created the Uplift Innovation Management Platform, which is a digital platform that creates innovation communities for cities, property companies, and really any organization that's looking to understand the innovation ecosystem that is relevant to their operations and launch opportunities for that ecosystem to discover, vet, and select innovations that are best fit for their operations. I'm very happy to moderate the first panel discussion of the IoT Proptech Summit 2021. Living Smart, 360 degrees of technology for return on investment and exceptional customer experience in the multifamily space. And I'm delighted to be hosting a very knowledgeable panel of experts in this area who will introduce themselves shortly. But first of all, I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for joining us this morning. This webinar will be recorded, allowing people who could not join us at this time to view it later. And for people who are with us live, we'll dedicate a few minutes at the end of the session for your questions, which we ask you to enter into the Q&A function. So make a note of your questions and enter them by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. And I'll read out some of your questions to our panel after our discussion. So without further ado, then let me request all of our fantastic group of speakers to please introduce themselves. Desiree, let's start with you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me today. My name is Desiree Carter. I am the Director of IoT Smart Cities with Rogers for Business. I have about 20 years of international experience as a consultant and strategist, helping organizations, governments adapt innovation, modernize their existing platforms to build safer communities. So with a focus on disruption and innovation and digital transformation, I help organizations reshape and engage with customers in their communities. So thank you, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful, thank you. And Jennifer.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Ricci, and I've been in the condominium management field for over 14 years. The first half of my career, I worked as a property manager for a developer until I made the switch to my current employer, ICC Property Management, where I was able to grow my career, and I'm now a regional manager for a portfolio of downtown condominiums. I'm also responsible for teaching or administering the required education component for licensing to all of the ICC employees.
Wonderful, thank you, Jennifer. And finally, Elliott, would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely, thank you, Mikele. My name is Elliott Samuel. I'm Vice President of Sales and Proptech here at Eddy Solutions. Just a little bit of background, I guess, on Eddy. As well as myself, Eddy Solutions, an intelligent water monitoring company focused on mitigating the risk of water damage, as well as getting a greater understanding of the consumption and conservation efforts potentially ensued inside of buildings through the use of intelligent monitoring and IoT devices. And myself, I'm focused on working with all various stakeholders throughout construction, real estate, at mitigating that risk and aligning them with technology that meets their needs for today and the future.
Wonderful, thank you, Elliott. And that's a fantastic lineup of speakers with different perspectives on the topic this morning. So now let's start to talk about living smart. What does that mean to the average person? Elliott, you've been working in this space for a while now. So let's start with you.
Sure, thank you. So living smart, yeah, it's an interesting term. I actually, I sort of view living smart more as living connected than anything, because really it's about having access to data. And for most people, to the average person, the average consumer, it's really about enabling themselves with further conveniences, further information to, I guess, make smarter decisions or have more convenience within their life. Same thing extends within operating environments as well, in commercial environments, but the focus in that type of space is really more facing efficiencies, generating ROIs, and and being able to create better experiences for residents as well as occupants inside, various types of real estate.
Okay, wonderful. So the focus is on making things more convenient and more efficient for the people who are occupying the properties. That's wonderful. Desiree, would you like to add anything to that from the telecom perspective?
For sure. Smart living, smart communities. I think we come from the approach as well. It's not only about, or it starts with people, and it's not only about technology. It's about using and installing digital interfaces in traditional infrastructure or streamlining operations. It's about using technology and data purposefully to make better decisions and definitely deliver a better quality of life.
That is very interesting. Thank you very much for that perspective from the telecoms perspective. In terms of investment, what is happening in this space that brings the concept of smart and connected living to people in the community? Let's start with a property management perspective. Jennifer,
Sure.
do you want to kick this off here?
Sure, thank you. I think as more and more people are turning to condominiums as an investment, whether you're a young first-time homebuyer or you're a seasoned investor, purchasers are looking for a more modern and connected living environment, right? And that goes to that concept of the smart and connected living spaces, which elevate you from the others. We're finding that a growing number of condominiums are investing in technology like building communication portals, safety platforms, leak detection systems, and even just simply elevator and lobby screens as a way to increase the value of the property to prospective purchasers, but also to enhance the quality of life for the people who are living in that space.
Absolutely. So creating efficiencies, making things more convenient and enhancing quality of life. That's really interesting. And how about from a telecom provider's perspective? Desiree, what are your thoughts here?
Well, whether you're an owner or an operator or a tenant, as part of the telecommunications community, we have clearly seen it through our COVID experience and how important our industry is to society. How we remain connected from home and the basics of connectivity will go to students that go to school, non-essential workers can work from home, or the push to automate industrial settings. This is to ensure that there is definitely interaction, and connectivity has been relied more than often. So things that we consider from an advancement point of view, and we apply to like our society and in particular into property management, they're occurring all around us. So 5G, edge computing, the explosion of sensors and extension of battery life, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and predictive analytics. Sorry, I can't speak today, but analytics. So telcos specifically are connecting with end-to-end solutions to address that connected home. Security spaces, indoor air quality monitoring, logistics to water leak detection with Eddy. Those are all things that are enabling property owners, operators, and tenants to definitely stay connected.
And so the focus, it's fair to say, is on the infrastructure as well as the technology innovations that the solutions that are put into these properties in order to create the improved quality of life for the residents.
Exactly.
Wonderful. So building on that topic, Jennifer, in your experience, how are you finding the appetite for these smart technologies in homes?
We're finding that the appetite is growing every day. Boards are changing, the landscape of condominiums are changing, with residents expecting efficiency and wanting to participate in and know how their community is being managed. Residents are looking for elevated customer service, and having access to these technologies allows the condominium manager to send real-time updates to residents, right? Most people have become accustomed to that Amazon model for customer service, where the moment you hit the purchase button, you know when your goods are being packaged, when they're on the truck to be delivered, and then the second that they've actually been delivered to your home. And so we're able to do that same thing with building communication software through maintenance requests or just providing information to residents. We're also able to communicate real-time critical information to residents. For example, an emergency water shutdown to the building, which again lends itself to that elevated customer experience that everyone is looking for, because they know what to expect when they are going to come home or what's going to happen for their day. And on the other side of that, as condominium managers, we have so much going on every day. We are charged with having to be a master of all trades. We're engineers, we're lawyers, we're even therapists, on top of working within regulations that are constantly changing. Managers look to smart technologies as an asset in their daily lives, being able to pull up building drawings or fire safety plan or your valve charts on my phone, no matter where I am, is invaluable. Having real-time technology like a leak detection system or an intelligent leak detection system to mitigate the loss is another great example of this. And on top of that, it provides peace of mind to the boards and residents that their investment is being properly managed.
Very true, very true. And that's a good lead in to ask Elliott to weigh in from the solution provider's perspective.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. Yeah, there was some very good points, Jennifer. And, really, we're starting to see some really significant growth in this space. And I think a lot of that, it's really a byproduct of the disruption that took place as a result of COVID in working environments and home environments. People are spending an inordinate amount of time at home. And part of that is ensuring that that type of space is going to provide efficiencies and conveniences now, because buildings are taking on much greater loads of occupancy than they ever have during the day. People are utilizing fixtures far more than they ever have. And then on the flip side, you look at commercial real estate, and that space has totally had to do a 180, reinvent itself to a large degree to ensure that the office has become now more of a gathering space, a showcase, a place that people can congregate versus a need to have type of environment for a lot of people's jobs. And because of that, there's also additional risk inside of those environments. So, depending on what the needs are, there's so many different potential use cases that are being driven through smart technologies, whether it's, operators trying to find efficiencies or trying to be more competitive in a market where everybody really does have to show their best because the cost of technology is going up. It's a very competitive. The cost of technology is going down, but at the same time, it's a very competitive market as far as rents are concerned in multifamily rental, and you have to stay lean and be able to provide scalable systems that, to Desiree's point, have sufficient infrastructure to support this explosion of sensors, which is providing all of this data all over the building. And then from there, be able to really justify that to the end users on the back end who are really supporting the cost of that technology. So it's really, we've seen amazing growth, and it's a product of life changing and the need for that technology really coming into play.
So you're finding a good appetite for these smart technologies across all different sectors and categories in the property sector.
It's proliferated every single area of our lives, not just property technology. The smart tech you're wearing on your wrist to give you the information about how fast your heart is beating, or whether you're having a leak coming from your toilet, or whether somebody left the door open in the boiler room upstairs. All of that information is very important for a variety of stakeholders for so many reasons.
Very good. And that has got to have an impact on the way the telecoms operate and handle all of this, all of these technologies being connected. Desiree, do you have, would you like to weigh in on that?
You know what? I would echo a lot of what Jennifer and Elliott has said. I think, from our perspective, there's a lot of curiosity. Curiosity as to what could set us apart. What's that differentiator? How can we utilize these systems and solutions and applications and apply these technologies to like our everyday life? So, I believe the role of the telecommunications community is to help bring all of those smart technologies together as a foundation and develop like full applications and solutions and enhancements, especially to that whole customer experience. Customer experience has gone from not just the experience, but the overall journey of the customer from the beginning to the end and all of the continuation from there. So those are things that we see from our sense. Through the foundation of a lot of things throughout these buildings or communities and solutions, it's the connectivity. How do we get reliable, infrastructure within the platform, supporting foundations, and help these exciting solutions proliferate and scale across the country. And with Rogers, we do have the largest network to enable a lot of these things. And with 5G, it is a function that is here, but hasn't been utilized to its fullest potential just as yet. And as businesses and buildings incorporate a lot of these things into their infrastructure, it's endless of the capabilities to help our consumers.
Absolutely. And all of these new devices and solutions being connected obviously increases the data that's being driven through the system. So let's talk about how data is driving living spaces and experiences. Jennifer, based on your experience, how is data driving the development and implementation of smart technologies in the residential world?
It's an interesting question because I think most people, when thinking of data in connection with condominiums, kind of go straight to the cents or dollar per square foot, where we are in comparison with the new building down the street or the similar aged condo 2 blocks over. And the data for that is always very skewed and for the most part not comparable. But what I do find is that we're always being asked by board members how many ICC properties have invested in a BAS system and has it provided any returns or any useful information, or what is the most popular building communication software that's being used. So I think those are some of the comparables that boards and residents are looking for to see where their community measures up within the condominium world using the data from those things.
Okay, and Elliott, I expect you've got some thoughts here from the supplier's perspective.
Yeah, no, data is driving everything. And I'll sort of go back to one of Desiree's points earlier about purposeful data, because what it really comes down to is there is a ton of data out there, and being able to sift through it and being able to understand it and interpret it is a whole other story. And so, ensuring that you have the right platforms which are driving use cases and driving the correct data that you're trying to understand is a really important thing. But also baseline information is something that, unfortunately in a lot of environments is lacking because of the fact that these systems haven't been implemented. There's no relational data, historically that you can work from, which ultimately, leads to those challenges when people are viewing things as, here's a cost per sensor per square foot versus being able to look at the historical data and say, here's the problem I'm looking to solve for. And determining whether that technology meets the use case or not is really going to come down to what's the data that you're looking for, what's the baseline information that you have in order to even substantiate you have a problem that you're trying to solve. And then from there, what results are you expecting? Because that's really what the whole thing is really about. It's about being able to take that information and drive meaningful, purposeful data from it that's going to create tangible results, whether that's better decisions in the future, or whether that's going to create automation in a space, whether that's a manufacturing space, whether it's a residential space, a commercial environment. All of that data needs to be good data, It needs to be consistent. And again, it's all driven on connectivity and on the infrastructure which it's built upon, because otherwise you're going to lose out on a lot of data as well, which is a really key element to it. So it all comes down to infrastructure platform and being able to sift through a lot of the noise to find purpose.
Very good. Absolutely. It's really important to have that baseline to understand how the solutions that you're implementing are actually helping you to perform better, and certainly to be able to calculate the return on investment in those solutions. And Desiree, on this point, do you have something to add here before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, sure. I think, each area that Jennifer represents and Elliott represents, I think, all of us utilize data to improve. So with that being said, it's opened up massive opportunities in monitoring and remote management. This gives us tangible information. It drives growth, especially in IoT, so Internet of Things. Whether you're a property management company, owner, or business of any sort, that full access to data and quick action response allows data to have better decisions. So we're not merely just tearing down silos. We're definitely being strategic in the work that we can do with this data. And there's different things. Data is not a bad thing. Sometimes people think of privacy and all of those things, and just think of how many things you put into your cell phone, your banking information and all of that. No matter what business, they're collecting useful information to help serve you better. So whether it is identifying cultural obstacles or realizing full potential of that data, it leverages the organizational infrastructure and reducing friction in those environments, or just applying a strategy. In order to be successful, there needs to be a go-to-market strategy on how to make your product, business, property management organization better. And it definitely gives us the ability to focus on processes to drive greater success and in a very hyper-competitive environment. So those are all of the things that we need to definitely look at.
Absolutely. Yes, certainly. It's very important to be collecting the right types of data, cut through the noise, get to the data that you need. And certainly the issue of data privacy is an increasingly big issue in the sector across all Internet of Things and all digital solutions. Something that I'm sure will be discussed further in the event today. So AI, artificial intelligence, is another hot topic in the connected space. AI is still in its infancy. How do we see AI in smart homes progressing? Elliott, would you like to start us off here?
Sure. So AI, it's a rather contentious issue for a lot of people, and a lot of times when people are referring to AI currently, they're really talking about behavioral learning, where there's ultimately human intervention, or there's some automation involved when it comes to the analytics. But as we start to see the field progress, and as we start to see the data get more and more refined and cross-functional use cases start to apply themselves, that's when we'll really start to see the rubber hit the road. In that, right now, a lot of the ecosystems that you're looking at for artificial intelligence are sort of, or for behavioral learning, are focused on individual use cases. But as those use cases start to be, more interfaced with one another, and they start to coincide, we'll begin to see, one piece of automation speak to another piece of automation, which ultimately is going to start to make decisions without human intervention. And at that stage, we're going to start to see some major efficiencies, but it's also something that we're going to need to be mindful of as well at the same time. And, at this stage, and even at that point, I would say you're still going to have some level of human interaction and some level of human oversight associated with that process, because again, we're still learning, right? And just as the whole process is, it'll continue to evolve, and we need it to get to a point of reliability before we can actually fully put our hands in that technology. And I don't even know if we want to fully do that at any point in time, just humanity-wise. But yeah, it's a whole other subject.
Well, we're seeing in real time how people are starting to make those decisions. It's really, really interesting area. And how about AI and telecoms from the Rogers perspective, Desiree?
You know what? I would echo a lot of things Elliott just said. AI is like one of those kind of unknown things, especially within the Canadian market right now. Our European colleagues and our Asian colleagues have really adapted a lot of this for the behavioral analytics. And we're now just adapting a lot of that of, as I said before, how to make better decisions or more accurate decisions and get responses and work done, say, in real time. So it helps to build that scalable architecture and platform, and it helps us to stay ahead of rapid change. I'm going to look at climate. Just think of all of the things that have happened from the climate change and how it affects how businesses operate, where your property is located, where if things that can affect how to manage a lot of things in that sense. So I think solutions save people time. So our employees or our customers can get back to what matters most. I think the pandemic has really shown us time is really important. And AI technologies such as like aggregate platforms or digital twins can do all of that foresight that we can't necessarily do ourselves. Definitely, as Elliott said, that human interaction will never leave. It might shift, it might change, but we definitely need human interaction in order to enable a lot of these platforms to be successful.
Absolutely. Very, very true. And then coming back to the topic of the title of the session on return on investment, this is a complex topic when it comes to investing in this sector. How can ROI be understood in this area? We'll start with Elliott from the supplier perspective. Elliott?
Yes. Okay. So ROI, it's a question I get asked quite often. Working in sales, it's something that's really top of mind because it's the foundation of almost every use case. It needs to be financially viable, and you need to be gaining some efficiency in most people's eyes. But from the perspective of ROI, again, I think it all stems back to use case and what you're trying to achieve. There are going to be some cases where you're talking about ROI and we're focused on financial metrics. There are going to be some cases where you're talking about ROI and you're focused on qualitative metrics, which won't necessarily, immediately show on the balance sheet, but over time, those efficiencies are gained in buildings, long-term, short-term, and again, the subject that I spoke about before, which was, baseline data. ROI is really tied to baseline data, and oftentimes when you're going into an environment, people will view ROI, let's say with water as an example. We mitigate the risk of water damage, right? And so one of the challenges, just conceptually, is that people associate the cost of mitigation of a risk with the cost of, let's say, the delivery of that commodity, which ultimately the two things aren't necessarily the same thing, right? And so when you're trying to understand what risks you're trying to solve for, as an example, one common question we get asked is, are there insurance benefits associated with going with leak protection? And yeah, there can be insurance benefits, but a question that I often revert back to my customers is, outside of insurance claims, would you be able to tell me information about, let's say, your occurrences that you spent out of pocket, and try to drive some of that information? What we often find is there's, like, again, because if you don't have systems in place that's aggregating this information with the challenges in property management and turnover that happen in these environments, there's a lot of data loss. And having these systems in place lead to that continuity of data on site and allows you to really say, okay, well, when we're trying to solve a problem, we've got good data sets to work from. And then we can say, here's the issue, and we can define ROI or define our objective on the basis of that. So it's really sort of that battle with use case, data sets, and what you're trying to achieve from an ROI perspective, sometimes qualitative, sometimes financial.
Absolutely, and that's really interesting perspective from the supplier end. And then Jennifer, how is return on investment viewed and defined in the property management world?
Yeah, I think that in the condo world, the days of location kind of being your driving factor is gone. People are now looking at common element fees. How can we maintain them? How can we keep them lower? And I think kind of to Elliott's point, I kind of separate them into two categories. I call them the instant return, which I guess is similar to the financial return, and the trickle down return, which is probably closer to the qualitative return that or investment that Elliott was speaking to. So like technologies like controlling your utility consumption, like the Nest thermostat or a building automation system, you're going to save money the moment that they're implemented, and you're probably going to see that on your financials fairly soon after you've implemented them. Whereas a technology like a leak detection system, it has that trickle down effect that I like to call it on your return. If you're lucky and you have only one leak a year, that leak detection system can save the corporation thousands of dollars just on emergency response and repairs, which then trickles down to less insurance claims, which then can lead to lower deductibles, which then goes to your premiums being maintained or stabilized. So it's that effect where it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, and then when you're going to actually see that return.
Interesting to note the agreement between the supplier side and the property management side. So that's very good news. And to finish off, Desiree, do you have something to add to this discussion of return on investment in smart homes technologies?
Well, I do actually, Mikele. It's an interesting topic, return on investment. You always look at it from that financial component. I think every organization, we can't be truthful to ourselves if that's not a component. But in addition to that, when I guess our Rogers for Business looks at it, we look at it as a return on innovation, not only investment. So there are three, I think, important factors to drive that ROI. Sustainability, ways our industry can be impactful and support to scale efforts around sustainability, because that, no matter what industry you're in, that definitely influences. That customer experience, I say, would be number two. Always driving to be better. How do we beat the competition? How do we improve our efficiencies in our buildings? How do we improve our efficiencies in our solutions, whatever we're doing? And then the last part of it, I would say, is that digital capability, that end-to-end solution. Gone are the days are just one solution. It's how we utilize Eddy solutions and connect it into other platforms so that everything is like on that one single pane of glass, and there's interconnectivity that way. So when we're driving that whole return on an innovation, we have to look at a holistic platform, not just one specific thing as before.
Very interesting, very interesting. I like that. I like the term return on innovation. And very important, obviously, to have the solutions interoperating with one another and creating even bigger improvements on quality of life to the residents. So before we get into the audience questions, let's finish with your one biggest piece of advice for companies delving into the smart living space. Desiree, why don't we start with you?
Okay, I would say smart spaces, connected living, or even smart cities, because all of that fits into my portfolio specifically. It's a very large task, but it is also very attainable. Whether it's a phased approach, connecting your current systems, or building a digital twin, something that you have to create from beginning to end. Some of those factors evaluate, I guess, our environment, no matter which area you're in. So things that I would say from a business perspective is look at all of the statistics out there. There's things that are saying like by 2050, 70% of the population is expected to live in urban areas. How does that apply to our Canadian landscape right now, especially within, as you see, I live in the Toronto area, and you see all of the condominiums that are being developed. How do we implement that and be more efficient? Again, like with cities, they consume 2/3 of the world's energy. So how do we reduce our carbon input or output, I should say? And that's definitely from a property perspective as well, because that is something that we have to look into. Things like leaky and broken pipes, or water management systems, or water leak detection systems, that's, I think it's about like 10, and Elliott could probably tell me 10, 15%, or even more of loss in specific areas. So like with Eddy Solutions and their water leak detection, it can help us assist and prevent a lot of the risk out there. So those are things that I would give as a recommendation, as to develop a strategy, see areas you can improve, and you don't have to do it all at one time. There's a way of looking at it from a phased approach as well.
Very good advice. And in the interest of time, we want to make sure that we have a bit of time for audience questions. So Elliott, your one big piece of advice for companies delving into smart spaces. No, fantastic.
I'll make it short and sweet. And you know what? It was great to hear that content from you, because you've got a lot of great knowledge on the subject. So, yeah, my greatest piece of advice, I think I'll be staying consistent on this, and it's know your data, right? It's know what you're trying to solve for. There's so many great companies out there. There are so many great pieces of technology and great people to work with. To try to solve these problems, it really just comes down to understanding what it is you're trying to solve for, really getting tactical about it, getting the data behind it, so that when you implement a solution, you're going to be able to measure the success of that solution and ensure that you're actually meeting your goals, and keep your vendor, accountable, right? Keep your partners accountable. That's the way that those relationships should work. We're all here to work together to enable people with data, to enable companies to grow, to enable people to have better lives. And it all comes down to making sure you're aimed in the right direction and working towards common goals.
Okay, very good. Just to make sure that we have a little bit of input from the panel, from the audience. So I'm just going to go to, we may just have time for one question. So I'm going to go with, which one trend in PropTech are you especially excited about? And you think this will become much bigger than it currently is? So I think this is something that all of our panelists can give a quick 1 minute each on. Elliott, shall we start with you?
Okay, which trend in PropTech do I feel is going to grow the most? I'd say probably it's going to be related to health tech, actually. So I think that a lot of in a lot of properties, we're going to be looking more at data in terms of the traffic of people, where people are moving, contact tracing, essentially, being able to enable a lot of the information that we haven't previously been looking at, so we can reduce risk. Because especially in confined environments, when you're talking about multi-residential or commercial environments, you got a large concentration of people in one space, shared air in some cases, and you need to ensure to be able to provide a higher duty of care. I think that's going to be an extremely hot trending subject as people start to especially return to offices in larger numbers and begin to start occupying that space. And then again, being able to provide those resources in the residential space so that people can have that one-stop shop and be able to, not have to leave their home to deal with seeing a doctor or getting feedback.
Very good. Absolutely true. And Jennifer, let's move to you. The one big PropTech trend that you can see is going to grow.
It may be an unpopular opinion, but I think AI in terms of kind of taking over property management's job or a portion of our job would just being able to quickly, a tenant texting property management, I need a plumber's contact information, or I need access to the declaration, and having something come back and say, here's the plumber's information, what is it that's happening? And then being able to sort of walk that resident through that that situation that they're going through with a leak or whatever, without even having to contact the property manager or contacting the property manager if it gets to a point where we're needed. So I think that's a very interesting part that's coming up.
Likely to grow. And just quickly, Desiree, the one big trend in Proptech that you think will be growing in the future?
I agree with Elliott. I believe our healthcare in-home patient monitoring, all of those things, you're at home, you're in your facility, and how to interconnect that with our hospitals, and having that in-home patient care as we move forward. So I agree with that.
Very good, very good. Well, we're over time at this point, so I'm just going to wrap up and say that it's been an absolute pleasure hosting this panel this morning. And I'd like to thank you all for taking your time this morning to share your experience and your wonderful insights. And I'm sure like everyone, just like me, who has been listening today has learned a lot from this discussion. The next session, which starts at 10 a.m., is entitled Accelerating Growth in IoT Technology, Leveraging Insurance Partnerships. So enjoy that session and enjoy the rest of the summit. And thank you once again to this very knowledgeable panel. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.